So Rick, I joke with you after you got off stage that at least you weren't faced with torches and pitchforks. The response was pretty good. It was warm.
I was surprised, yeah. The response was quite warm compared to what I thought it would be.
You have been the UFO boogeyman for at least 25 years, maybe longer.
At least 25 years.
Does part of you get a kick out of that a little bit?
I don't let it bother me. I did initially. I don't really let it get to me. I went from having a concern about it to not really caring about it to what you just said, be getting a kick out of it now.
Did you ever come to a UFO conference while working?
Yes.
As an assignment?
Yes.
Can you tell me?
In the, I believe it was 83 or maybe 84. I don't remember the year, but we came here. There were 4 of us that came here. And all we did was mingle. We took some photographs. We listened to some interviews. We made some contact with some people, but nothing real serious.
Is there, when a situation like that, is there an assignment, something specific, or just go and keep an eye on it, see what you find out?
There's just a general collection assignment. Go and collect whatever information you can.
Does it still happen?
I'm sure it does. I've met 2 here. There were 2 here. One Air Force OSI out of Nellis, and the other man, female, out of Nellis. And the man, he wouldn't tell me where he was from, but he was Air Force intelligence.
So you can spot him.
He readily admitted it to us.
Where does that information go? What would they be doing with it now?
They complete what they refer to as a domestic intelligence report, a collections report on attending a conference, UFO conference. They might find something interesting to write about, write in the report. They might hear something that might be of some interest to Air Force intelligence, and that's what they do.
So you would see ufologists who would hear that information, aha, the Air Force is spying on us. Is there a legitimate national security aspect to it? Something maybe like the exploitation of ufologists by a foreign power, something like that?
That's very interesting. Yes, it has happened, and there has been investigations on that. There was one particular UFO researcher that had been contacted by the Soviet Union, and that researcher was Bill Moore, and that researcher wanted everything Bill Moore had or could obtain from UFO conferences. And so Bill Moore went to all of them, and Bill Moore collected. But fortunately, we were onto that, and he was one of our sources, so he was reporting back to us.
So he's working with you, sharing that information. The Russians contact and ask him to do the same thing?
Exactly.
Wow. Have you seen evidence of the Russians planting disinformation that would affect, maybe national security policy in some way through the UFO issue?
I haven't I've seen reports of it in classified collection reports, but I haven't experienced myself. I've just read about it.
You had these battles with UFO people for years, and they accused you of this and that and mentioned it in books. It caused actual harm in your life, 2 investigations, right? Yes.
In 1987, I was investigated by the FBI for the MJ-12 documents. They claimed, the UFO researchers claimed I released them, I created them. I went through an investigation by the FBI, I was cleared. I took a polygraph, I was cleared. And again in '89, a different aspect of it came public. The FBI called me, the same agent that investigated me the first time, and said, I hate to do this again, but I need to talk to you again about this. And I was cleared, obviously, on that one. And a third time it actually happened when Bob Collins wrote the book Exempt from Disclosure. He put something in that book, and they thought that information came from me. So the FBI showed up at my doorstep with a search warrant and took my hard drive from my computer. And they looked at it. They came back later and told me it was clear, it didn't contain anything, and they paid me. They paid me $600 for another hard drive. They didn't give me my hard drive back, but they did find out who released that to Robert Collins. That was somebody out of Los Alamos, and they went after that guy, but I didn't do it.
So it has serious ramifications. This is no game for you. Anyway.
Exactly, absolutely. I've spent money on attorneys, either suing or during the FBI investigations, I had to hire attorneys.
I don't want to go in too much detail about MJ12, but you've been a link to that story and Bill Moore for a long time. You mentioned that you made a comment in passing earlier today that you think there's legitimate information in there.
Yes. I'm 90% sure that there's legitimate information. Those documents were created based on actual documents. The documents were released weren't. But and the Air Force covered itself, the government covered itself by saying, these aren't legitimate documents. Not that the information contained in it was not.
Can you say whether there was an organization like that?
Yes, there was.
You think that still exists?
I'm sure, I'm positive it exists. If I know that when Project Blue Book, and I was briefed into the program in 1979, and one of the things they mentioned in the report, in the briefing was that the Air Force ceased its investigation of UFOs in 1969 based on a condom report, but they continued a classified investigative program which intelligence officers were involved in. And when they needed a depository for the information from Project Blue Book, they were looking for an agency that wanted it, and DIA was only 10 years old. They raised their hand and said, we'll take it. And at that time, and during my time in, I know DIA had a repository for that information. Whether it still does today, I don't know.
You just heard the presentation of our stuff about DIA having a study that was ongoing, and there was a collection effort. It makes sense that they would collect that information when there's an encounter with national security implications, our weapons or nukes or something like that. It makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, any threat to national security, the government's going to investigate. And they're going to collect information. They're going to do thorough investigations. They're going to interview the people, and they're going to collect all the data possible out there. And that has to go someplace, to DIA.
You, of all people, understand the arguments of ufologists and the passion that they make. Hey, we want to know what's going on. But you also understand the flip side of why that information would not be released. Can you make the case of why there need to be secrets on that topic? Why the vault of secrets that you know exists should be kept closed?
Well, one of the main reasons is research and development. We have a great research and development program going on within the military today. And we have to fly, we eventually have to fly these crafts that they're creating, they're making, such as the 117, the F-22, the SR-71, and people are going to see these things flying, and they're classified. So that type of technology has to be kept out of our adversaries' hands. The Russians are still our adversaries today, also the Chinese. So that's why there's a program to maybe discredit or disinform people that, hey, what you're seeing as UFOs is not U.S. crafts.
So you got to be careful when you get this information.
Absolutely.
Is there a legitimate mechanism by which we can learn from UFOs, wherever they're from, and try to go after that technology? I mean, you've read those documents, you've heard those stories.
Yeah, there is. I think you know, it starts with the UFO reporting center. I mean, you call in and report UFOs. What they need to do from that point, it needs to be properly funded with qualified, experienced, and trained civilian researchers or investigators to go out and actively investigate those sightings in areas. Right now, it's not being done. MUFON comes days or weeks later, and they don't have the number one. I've dealt with MUFON in the last couple years, and those investigators, they're just not trained like they should be trained, and they don't do the footwork that you really need to do to investigate those type of sightings. And some of those sightings can be easily explained. They take too much time on those type of sightings that were probably a aircraft or a satellite or something that is related to an extraterrestrial.
There is disinformation. There are cover stories for the reasons you're describing. Is there also a legitimate phenomena, a legitimate mystery that should be studied?
Yes, absolutely. All my experience with UFO investigations over the years, and by 10 years in, there's a phenomenon out there that's, I think, can be dangerous to the United States. When you interfere with a a highly classified project, or when you fly around a jet fighter that's maybe going on a mission, or when you are flying under a B-52 bomber that has nuclear weapons on it, that's a legitimate concern for national security. That's a legitimate concern that we have to do something about.
Nuclear missiles, missile bases, the overflights.
Yes, that's true.
You come from a family of spies, of agents who have investigated this stuff, who have been part of the national security apparatus, right?
Yes.
Something in the blood.
Yes, my father, my uncle, and two cousins.
Is it a patriotism thing? Is it once they know they can trust the family that you get a leg up?
That's part of it, yes. They seek people, and it's, I hate to say this, it's who you know.
Right.
You know, if your father's been an Air Force colonel and he's had a meritorious service in 33 years, and your uncle was a Blue Book investigator, had meritorious service for 24 years, they're going to look at their siblings, and they're going to look at them and say, you know, they operated within the guidelines of the service, honorable service, and they look for the siblings. And I was just happened to be there. I was sought out, and I was recruited into OSI. I was actively recruited.
Hearing those stories today, you had a cool job. I mean, it was a lot of fun, and it was satisfying work.
It was. I would never change anything. Well, I probably would change some things I've done, but my career in OSI was fantastic. I had a lot of fun, but then again, there was a lot of agony.
Well, the Benowitz case, you talked about that in detail, so I won't go into too much of it, but that's got to be on your mind for all these years. Have been blamed for driving him crazy. That's the story, right? Rick Doty drove that guy crazy.
Yes, that was the story. That I brainwashed him, I fed him chemicals. I mean, I've heard it all. We shot beams in his head. I mean, I've heard everything, and none of it's true. Every aspect of that is false. Paul was so infatuated with the subject of UFOs that he did this to himself.
He was a brilliant but troubled person.
Very brilliant and very troubled.
He tapped into something, national security programs, that he shouldn't have had access to, that he'd somehow managed to get information about. But he also tapped into something else. You said 60% of the information he was gathering is something beyond.
Exactly.
What is it?
We don't know. We wish we knew. I sent that information up. There were reports made, other investigations done, scientific analysis done. They don't know. They don't know what these UFOs or these objects that he photographed, or how he collected signals, or especially what they were most concerned with the frequency range. He was collecting frequencies that were up in a high gigahertz that we didn't have at that time period in the 1980s. So it had to come from an ET source, an extraterrestrial source, not a terrestrial source.
You were at Area 51 not once but twice, right?
Twice.
As a security officer.
Yes, Air Force counterintelligence officer.
So you were protecting legitimate national security programs out there.
Yes.
There is an aspect to UFOs in those programs, right?
Absolutely.
And can you, how much can you say?
There's some programs, classified programs, that dealt with satellites photographing space-based objects. And now it could be other satellites, like Soviet satellites or Chinese satellites, but there was also an aspect of that photographed any kind of space-based objects or crafts in space,
unknown.
Which meaning unknown crafts in space, such as UFOs or extraterrestrial crafts.
So that information, as well as the photographs of Paul Benowitz's that you saw that were, it's a flying saucer. Where does that stuff go?
I wish I knew. It went to headquarters. It went to our headquarters, and from that point on, I would guess DIA has a repository someplace, and it went there. It was very difficult to get anything back that we sent up. Even if we legitimately needed something for maybe a criminal case or something like that, or even a espionage case that the FBI was involved with, and they hadn't had access to that information. So we asked headquarters, could you send it back to us so we could brief, clear the FBI agents to be briefed into? They wouldn't send it back.
Among your fellow intelligence officers and counterintelligence Is there an understanding of the phenomena or an appreciation for it, or is that also stovepiped, kind of?
No, I'm a member of the Retired Intelligence Officer Association, and almost exclusively, although there's some naysayers in a group, there's always naysayers in every group, because they weren't given access to certain programs. But for the majority of the ones that I meet with, excess of 30 former intelligence or retired intelligence officers, they all believe this is an absolute real phenomena, UFOs, and that there's some sort of a threat. And it varied upon opinions of the different officers, but varying threats to national security from these objects, from these crafts.
You've seen the stories that I've aired over the years, and Lazar and things of that sort. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being completely bogus, 10 being really real. Where does it fall?
I'd say it was a good 9. 8 in some areas and 9 in the other. He had some things wrong, but he had most of the things right. Although, as I said today in my presentation, my classification of what I knew about that area was S2. The complete complex was S2. What Bob Lazar was referring to was S4, which was 4 levels below S2. So when I said I'd never been to S4, some people asked me, well, I thought you said you were S2. Well, I wasn't at Bob Lazar's S4, that was underground. I was at S2, which were the administrative offices that functions for and control area things about S4.
You drove down there one day on an assignment, and it doesn't look like there's a facility, and suddenly there is, right?
Absolutely. I was driving down in a 4x4 Jeep, a C7 Jeep. I was following the road. I was given a map. I drove down there, and I couldn't find anything, and I thought I'm at the wrong place. And all of a sudden, suddenly appeared 2 Air Force security police officers that came out with M16 rifles and said, "What are you doing here?" They saw my sticker on the OSI vehicle, and I said, "I'm here to interview some people." He said, and he checked all my badges and so forth. He said, "Okay, I want you to drive through that door right there and then park the first space to the right." And I looked over at the mountain, and I said, "What door?" He said, "It'll open in a minute." And it opened. It was all camouflaged. It opened. I drove in. I pulled to the right, parked, got out, walked over to the entry control point, did my exchange badge system, and that was a facility.
That's pretty wild. Not many people can say that they've been to that spot. Supposedly there's never been anything there, ever. There's no facility, no road, no anything.
It's there. I can guarantee it's there. It's very well camouflaged, but it's there.
Can you talk about the project you're working on, the book project, not the other one, but the book project, and what you hope to, the troubles you're having in getting it cleared, and what it'll be about?
I wrote a book in 2015 about my life in intelligence, everything that I did for those 10-year period, and some things I did during my Air Force stint, my active duty stint, which was also in a form of intelligence. And I put it all together. I had help from a person to write it. I had a publisher, but I had to send it to the Air Force clearance office to get it cleared, because I'd had a top secret clearance and code word clearance before. So I sent it there. It was a 569-page manuscript. I sent it to them. It took them about 4 months to get it back to me. And when it got back to me, 343 pages of it was totally redacted.
Ouch.
So there was no way it wouldn't make sense if I. So I've been appealing that over and over again. During the Obama administration, I had people telling me I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. And then it just died. And I kept asking, kept calling, and then of course a new administration came in, a Trump administration came in. I'm having the same problems. But hopefully they sent me back. I had to hire an attorney, Washington-based attorney, and he's pushing things along for me. And so hopefully I just have to redact about 169 sentences, and then hopefully it'll be published by the end of the year.
As an intelligence officer, last question. As an intelligence officer, you had a job to do, an assignment, you followed orders dealing with this topic. As a human with an inquisitive mind, you're interested in this stuff. Are you encouraged by the general nature of what's happening, what seems to be unfolding right now? cautiously optimistic.
I am very impressed. I'm very impressed by almost every speaker here this week. I spent the whole week here. I got here on Saturday, and I've spent the whole week here, listened to almost every speaker, and I'm very impressed with the presentations. I'm also impressed with the enthusiasm from the people that come here and frequent this event, and the researchers, the dedicated researchers that I've met. And I've met some wonderful people. I've met some really good people that are researching this in depth as an ordinary person, and I'm very impressed by it.
The events, ATIP, OSAP, news coming out, the New York Times, I mean, that's an amazing story. It wouldn't have happened years ago. Does it change the ground rules? I mean, does it change the environment for somebody like you?
I believe it does. I think a disclosure is going to happen, a piecemeal, and I think this is part of it. The tic-tac, those videos, the information that's being disseminated. But my sources tell me that this was just a very small fragment of the entire picture. The release that was occurring because of Senator Harry Reid, who is a wonderful person. I met him once, as I told you. I think it's just piecemeal. I think that's just like a sliver compared to what the government has. And let me tell you this before we go. One of the reasons that this project, the investigation and examination, the technical examination of UFOs, have been going on for so many years, Dr. Hal Puthoff made it very clear at one point some years ago. He said, this technology is so advanced that we just can't understand it. Eric Davis says we'd have to write new mathematical equations to understand this. And so what we have to do is just do what we can now and just move it along until we get enough technology to understand the full program.
That's how it was described to me one time, is every 10 years or so, they wheel it out and take another look at it and see, can we figure it out yet? And they wheel it back in.
That's exactly true.
Thanks,
Yes.
Rick.
You're welcome.